Hello everyone, this is Dooster with Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. The story I want to read to you today comes out of my book, Trials and Tribulations. It is available on Amazon. It is a collection of short stories, just odd occurrences. And what I'm going to read to you today is called Shake, Rattle, and Roll. It is about the great earthquakes of 1811 and 1812. The Great Comet made its first appearance in the night sky on March 25, 1811. It remained visible to the naked eye on through December of that year, peaking in brightness about October. To astronomers, it was to become known as the Great Comet of 1811. To the residents of Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Arkansas, it was a harbinger of bad things to come. It was a wondrous sight to behold as it hung motionless in the northwest sky. But along with its awe-inspiring beauty, there also came an uneasy feeling of foreboding and impending doom. It was an omen of bad things to come. On December 16, 1811, about 2 o'clock in the morning, a thunderous roar spread across Tennessee and its neighboring states, followed immediately by a sudden and violent shaking of the ground. Chimneys collapsed and stone foundations crumbled as the ground undulated and heaved. Shock wave after shock wave spread across the area, opening huge crevices several hundred feet deep. Plumes of sand and water were forcibly ejected from the depths of the earth, some to a height of 30 yards. The shock was so powerful, it was felt in Washington, D.C., and residents of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Norfolk, Virginia, were awakened from their sleep. Farm animals panicked and broke from their pens. Waterfalls and whirlpools formed in the Mississippi River as the ground rose and sank. The waters of the mighty Mississippi River flowed backwards to fill a 1,000-acre depression that had just been created by the violent shaking and settling of the earth. Reelfoot Lake had just been born, and residents of the newly formed state of Tennessee had just experienced their first major earthquake. This was just the beginning of a nightmare that would continue for months to come. Following the initial quake, strong aftershocks went on throughout the early morning hours, and about daylight, another major quake, even larger than the previous one, rocked the area. Several boats on the Mississippi River were left sitting on gravel bars as the water receded, only to be washed against the banks as the water returned with a vengeance. The roar emanating from the river was unearthly, and when mixed with the cries and screams of the beasts and fowls, it was downright ghastly. The river level rose and fell as fissures opened and closed up and down the riverbed, sending jets of water, steam, and sand high into the air. Sulfur fumes and dust expelled from the fissures saturated the air, blocking out the sun as if it were midnight. Over the next several days, aftershocks occurred several times a day, but were fairly light compared to the previous ones. Then on January 23, 1812, another earthquake hit the area, even more violent than the previous ones had been. It was reported that the ground was in continual motion, with visible waves rolling across the surface, until February the 4th, when another major tremor occurred. 3 days later, while still experiencing aftershocks from the previous quake, another concussion occurred around 4 in the afternoon that put the others to shame. The concussion rang church bells as far away as Boston, Massachusetts. The thunderous roar was deafening as the Mississippi receded, then quickly overflowed its banks, taking entire groves of trees with it. The banks were littered with fallen trees, dying fish, and the wreckage of boats. One observer stated nature appeared to be running in utter chaos. The rivers boiled like a pot over hot coals, and mortals fell prostrate and prayed for their souls. Buildings were damaged as far away as 300 miles from the epicenter. the town of New Madrid, Missouri, was completely destroyed, the ground sinking to a depth of 15 feet during the quakes. This series of earthquakes and tremors continued on through December 13th, 1813, when another major quake hit the area, shaking the ground from the Gulf of Mexico to Detroit. Smaller tremors were reported in the area through 1817. As many as 2,000 quakes occurred from that first initial tremor to the last. This series of earthquakes would later be attributed to the New Madrid Fault that runs along the Mississippi River near New Madrid, Missouri. The death toll from the earthquakes is unknown. It is probably fairly low, since the area surrounding the epicenter was sparsely populated at the time, and what structures that did exist at the time were predominantly log and timber construction, which led to more flexibility than any other structures. One often wonders what occurred in Robertson County during the violent earthquakes, for very little has been recorded. The one article I found among Gene Durrett's files mentioned a two-story inn along the Louisville and Nashville Pike called the Red Brick Inn. It was so heavily damaged during the quake that the upper level had to be removed. It is certain that many chimneys were damaged, and several wells and springs dried up or became sulfurous. Most of the construction in the time was log, and due to their construction, log structures fared better than masonry structures. For example, the Smith County Courthouse in Carthage, in Carthage, Tennessee, a large brick structure was considerably damaged, and many chimneys in the area were thrown down. Freshwater springs in what is now Christian, Simpson, and Logan County, Kentucky, turned into sulfur springs, and one observer called them the strongest brimstone springs he ever met with. Clarksville reported a number of chimneys destroyed, and many inhabitants were terrified during the quake. One observer in neighboring Kentucky was on horseback at the time of the February 7th quake. He stated he was well aware of the quake, and his horse refused to move, locking its legs against the unnatural motion of the ground. It was nighttime, and there was no moonlight, yet the atmosphere was remarkably luminous, and objects could be seen at a considerable distance. The intensity of the earthquakes has been carefully researched and determined to have well exceeded 8.0 on the Richter scale, as originally stated. These were the most powerful earthquakes to have ever hit the continental United States. Research has since determined that there were even larger quakes predating the 1811 quakes. Now the question is, could another earthquake of this magnitude occur again? The answer is definitely. When? Scientists say there is a 90% probability of a 6.0 to 7.0 earthquake before the year 2040. Earthquakes are impossible to predict. It could be tomorrow, could be 1,000 years from now. But one thing is certain. Due to the construction methods in use today and the density of the current population, the loss of life and property would be astronomical, given the magnitude of the 1812 earthquakes. And I thank you for listening. Like I said, this the story and the other ones I have read a few days before are available in my Amazon book, Trials and Tribulations, Volume 1, and Volume 2 is still in the works. So anyway, I thank you for your time. If you don't mind, go out and like and subscribe to my channel, Cryptids and Critters Paranormal, and I will catch you later.